guys, welcome back for another video. I'm Jess and I'm one of the creative designers here at Sizzix. Today I want to share with you a few Mother's Day card makes using one of our stamp framelit sets from Chapter 1 2022. This is the Thankful Bicycle by Jen Long, and I'm going to be using this stamp framelit set to create one full card from start to finish. So we've got this 3D bike with those lovely flowers and the sentiment, and then I'm also going to show you a quick couple of extra ideas and how versatile this die set can be. So we've got one here with using the stamp set and then some acrylic paints, and then I've even got an extra little one using some of the 3D flowers as well. So this is a great opportunity to see how versatile these stamp framelit sets can be, and obviously how you can make some gorgeous cards ready for Mother's Day. If you like the projects, if you remake them, if you get any of the products that I mentioned today, please leave me a comment and image down below. I'd love to see your guys' Mother's Day cards and Mother's Day makes. Use the hashtag MyMakingStory if you're sharing across any of our socials, and then that way I can see it and we can share it for everybody else to see. I'll also be sharing a discount code at the end, guys, where you can get a little bit of money off anything that I've mentioned today if you head on over to the Sizzix website. So if you want to see how I've made those cards and how I have used that stamp framelit set, then keep on watching. Okay guys, so in Chapter 1 2022 there are two stamp framelit sets. So we've got one which is the Thankful Bicycle by Jen Long, and then let me check the name of this one, is Big Hugs by Olivia Rose. So stamp framelit sets are essentially stamp sets and die sets in one. So you get the stamps that work perfectly with the size of the die sets. So your stamp will usually work inside of your die set or your framelit, and then you'll usually get some extra pieces. So we've got some 3D flowers here, and some extra sentiments and hearts and things on that one. Today I'm going to be using the Thankful Bicycle just because I am going to be making Mother's Day cards, so I think this one will work a little bit better, and I really like the flower stamp and the 3D flower on this one, so I'm going to be using this one today. So I'm going to pop this to one side and I'm just going to prep my background for my first card for now. So I'm going to be making a square card, and what I've done is I've prepped a white card base, so just a square white card base. I believe this is about 14 centimeters by 14 centimeters, and then from the Arctic Sky cardstock I've literally just cut a square just ever so slightly smaller, so I've got that border frame. Okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some of our gesso primer. You could also use one of our white creamy acrylic paints, so like the one I've got here but in white. You could totally use that as well. I just wanted something a little bit thicker, and I thought this would work really well. So what I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to take a little bit on my finger. You could use a sponge, particularly like the sea sponges are really good for this, but I just wanted to show you guys how easy it is to do it without. And then I'm just going to dab the gesso ever so slightly with my finger, and I'm going to create little clouds which are adorable. So just take off quite a lot of it. You don't need much on your finger at all. We want them to be quite soft, and what I find with using your finger is you get a really nice shape, and you can really soften out the edges because I want them to be quite whimsical. Just take off the excess, and you can add as many or as few as you want. I'm trying to keep them centered mostly to the top of my card. You can always put something down underneath your surface if you're worried about getting marks on. And then what I would do is I'd kind of leave that to dry, and then I'd build on top of any areas that I want them a little bit more pigmented. So you can do this while it's still slightly damp because we've done such a thin layer. It'll dry super quick, but you can really build those areas up and you can create a sort of cloud effect. Okay, and once you've done that and it's all dry, you're going to have something that looks like that. And then we can pop it on to our card front. So I've just got some foam tape on the back of here. I'm just going to peel that off because I want it ever so slightly raised. And I'm going to pop that on the front of my card. Like so. Okay, so we've got our card base already with our background, and I'm going to move that to one side. We can now start to use that Thankful Bicycle die set. So I'm going to take it out of the packaging. And I have actually used this one before, so some of the bits have moved around. But you can obviously see you get 3 stamps. So you get the thanks bunches, the flower, and the actual bike stamp set. And then you get the flower framelit and the bike framelit that fit inside of or around each of those stamps. And then you get a 3D flower element. We're pretty much going to be using all of the elements except for these 2 stamps, but I am going to show you guys a fun way to use this flower stamp in a second, and I'll recommend different ways that you can mix and match things. So when you're doing stamp framelits, you can either die cut first or stamp first, and everyone says which one should I do first, and it's completely personal preference, okay? It completely depends on what works for you, and you might want to trial and error different ways, okay? So what you can do is I could just take a plain piece of white card. Bear in mind that when you are stamping, guys, you do want to use smooth cardstock, because otherwise if it's textured, it's not going to stamp as well. So smooth cardstock is definitely the way to go. And I'm using white because I'm actually going to colour it in. So I could cut that out of white cardstock and then have that and stamp on it, which is what I'm going to do. Or I could take the white cardstock and stamp, and I'm going to show you both ways. And then, like I said, it's completely personal preference of what you prefer. So I'm just going to use plain black ink, and what I'm going to do is I've got a plate from a Sidekick machine that I'm actually going to use as my stamping plate. It just means that I can attach my stamp on there, and it means that I can then apply pressure evenly. If I did it with my fingers, I'd kind of struggle to get it down as perfectly as I want it to and apply pressure evenly. So this way, it just works really well. You could use just a thin piece of plastic. If your lid for your ink is flat, you can also use the lid of your ink as well, which I do use a lot when I'm using my clear embossing ink pad, because it has a flat top. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to press that in here. So I'm going to do it first on just the plain white cardstock that we've got. So you want to just make sure it's completely covered, and this is why the stamp kind of block or plate works, because it means that you can get everywhere covered without getting your fingers dirty. And then you can just stamp that, and I can apply that really even pressure. Okay, and then I can pull that off, and you have a really nice stamped piece. Then what I would do if I'm going to cut that is I would place my die over the top, make sure it's all lined up, and then I just use some maker's tape and hold that in place. So I just use that to hold that die set in place, and then when I run it through the machine, the die set's not going to move about, okay? Another way to do it is obviously to cut first and then to stamp. Again, completely personal preference. It doesn't matter, it works both ways. It just depends on what you prefer. This is a little bit more tricky because you need to make sure you line it up perfectly when you're stamping, but it still works just the same. Okay. So I am doing this upside down and without my glasses. So if my alignment is a little bit off, please forgive me. Again, you can always pop a silicone mat or something, or just a piece of paper underneath if you're worried about your surface, if you miss it by a little bit. Just again, make sure you've applied it pressure evenly all over. Give it a firm press in some of the harder places, like where there's more detail around the basket and things like that. And then just pull it off and you have your perfect stamped bike. And then all you want to do is you want to just let the ink set and dry for a second while you before you apply any colour or anything over the top, particularly if you're doing wet colouring like watercolouring. You want to wait for it to dry, okay? While we're waiting for those to set and dry, I'm going to be making 2 3D flowers. So I've got one ready-made here. So I've layered the darker pink underneath the sort of lighter, brighter pink, and then I've got my centre element. And these are going to act as the wheels of the bike. You can also use the stamp flower as the wheels of your bike, but I wanted to make it a little bit more 3D, and I'm going to use these as the wheels of the bike, okay? So what you want to do first is you obviously want to cut your flowers. So you're going to want to use these 2 dies. So you want your centre section. This is with some of our pearl rose gold cardstock, and then I've got the flowers with our darker and our lighter pink. Okay, and then I'm going to sculpt the flowers just to give them a bit of dimension. So I'm taking my paper sculpting kit, so I've got my foam mat and then my sculpting tool. I'm just going to sculpt them, and you can see how they join up pretty much perfectly, and you don't need to attach those. I'm going to show you in a second because they look like a full flower once you layer them up anyway. Okay, then I can layer them up. So I'm going to add some glue. So this one is going in under the bottom, so I've got some glue on there, and then you just want to position it so you can see most of the petals. Okay, let's leave that to dry and we'll do the centre section. So the centre section is just this piece, and we're going to fold this long bit in half. Like so, and then I'm going to apply glue along that line, and I'm going to twist this from the section without the circle. I'm just going to give it a twirl and make sure it's nice and tight and secure. There we go, and then that little circle there, I'm just going to push that down and then add a little bit more glue, and that's going to stay in place and keep everything secure. And you just want to hold that for a couple of seconds until that's dry. Once that's secure and dry, what you can do is you can start to sort of prise these bits outwards, and you can create a fuller looking flower centre, okay? And then we can add that to the centre of our flower. So I'm just going to add a little bit of glue and attach those. And there we have our 2 flowers, perfect to go onto our bike as the wheels. So I'm going to move those to one side, and we can bring back in my bike. And what you can do now is you can start to colour in. So you can do that, like I said, with wet medium if you're using a permanent ink, or you can just use pencil crayons. So I'm going to start with the basket and I'm just going to colour it in. And you basically want to keep going and colour in all your sections until you have it all completely coloured exactly how you like it in all the colours that you want it to be. And then we have a finished coloured bike. So you could do loads of different colour combinations. I've got a purple, a pink one. The basket isn't finished on that one, but you get the idea that you can change up the colours completely to how you want them. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start arranging things on the front of my card. So you can see how that's already coming together with the wheels. I've also got a sentiment already pre-cut, so I'm just using the All Occasions die set from the chapter, so I can use those as well. So I can just die cut Happy Mother's Day there. And I've just cut that from rose gold cardstock. The only thing that I think I'm missing is something underneath, and I think I want like a grass element. So I'm going to do that in 2 ways and see what works best. So I've got the green cardstock cut to the length of my card front that I want. With this one, I'm literally just going to rip a sort of grassy section. And then what I want to do is I want to take my distress head with my multi-tool. So that comes with the multi-tool, the distress head does. And I'm literally just going to run that along the edge, and I'm just going to distress it a little bit more. And I think it gives a really authentic effect and just makes that edge a little bit more interesting. Okay, so we've got our grassy section cut there. Another way to do it is to take some scissors and literally just cut little sections. Okay, so you could fold it if you wanted to. I didn't want to fold in it really. And you can go in and you can do little triangles and make them look even more like pointed grass. And then you can slightly curve those. So I think I'm going to go with the ripped and distressed one. I'm just not sure. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach that on here. So I'm going to use my my permanent adhesive roller. I'm just going to attach that so that is secure where I want it. I've got my grassy section, and then that gives me an idea of where I want my bike. I am going to slightly raise the bike with some foam tape. So just move that to one side and just raise that slightly. If you need to rip it, it's really easy to rip this foam tape. So if you need larger sections, smaller sections, whatever you need, you can just rip it. I'm just going to do those few sections, I think. Roughly about there. Oh, that's the thing. You need the the flowers there as well, because obviously they need to be touching that grass so it looks like your bike isn't just floating in midair. Then I'm just going to add some glue onto the back of these. So one there. And one there. And then I can just adhere this. So when I cut this, I added some of our Sizzix adhesive sheets onto the back of the cardstock and cut the die set with that on the back. So because they're quite thin dies, it just makes it a lot easier because I can just peel that backing off and stick that down. And that is just going to go right over the top. And then whether to do it like that. I'm sorry if it's slightly off line, I am doing it upside down. And then Mother's Day. There we go. We have our finished 3D stamp framelit Mother's Day card. Some really nice fun techniques in there, and I love the 3D element of the flowers for the bike wheels. I just wanted to show you a couple more makes really quickly with the other elements. So what I've started to do here is I've taken a white piece of cardstock and I've cut it slightly down. So I've got one of our cards and envelopes. This is an A6 card, and then I cut my white cardstock slightly smaller. And what I've started to do is started to stamp that flower stamp onto the cardstock and create almost like a repeat pattern. So the way I'm doing that is I'm using our Sizzix clear adhesive, clear inking pad for embossing, and I'm just stamping that in there. And then I'm placing that onto my cardstock. And again, just giving it a firm press. Like so. Then I've just been adding some embossing powder. This is the gunmetal embossing powder because I want it to be as close to black as I can get. Just using a funnel tray to catch the excess. Sprinkle it on and then just shake off the excess. And then it picks up where you've stamped. And then all you need to do to that is you need to just heat it using a heat tool, and then that will melt the embossing powder, and then it'll mean that it isn't a powder anymore, it's sort of a melted surface. So the way that I like to do this is because if I'm using watercolors or a wet coloring agent, it doesn't make this run because this will resist the water and resist the paint. If you use ink, particularly non-permanent ink, it will start to run. Okay, so if you created a repeat pattern and then started to colour it in with the embossing powder and colour it in with the creamy acrylic paint, you'd have something that looks like this. So I'm just going to finish off that last one that is missing. I'm going to bring in my mixed media mat. And then I'm using the creamy acrylic paint. So this is just the hibiscus colour. And all I'm doing is placing it teeny tiny dot. Okay, you don't need much because we're going to water it down and create a watercolour effect with this. I've been using the hibiscus, the primrose, the mango tango and limoncello colour, but it's completely up to you what kind of colour scheme you go for. I'm just wetting my brush and then adding water to this. And as I start to add the colour, you can see that it resists the water. So if I go over this section, it resists the water. So those black lines where the embossing powder is will resist. Now, I can't take credit for this idea. This was inspired by the lovely Alexis. She did a card very similar to this for a project, and then we talked about ways to improve it, because she did it with black ink and then coloured it in with pencils, I believe. And so to use wet medium, we thought that using embossing powder would be a great idea. So you can go in and add more vibrant colours by using less water, particularly around the edges. I like to do that. And you can have a lot of fun building that up. And it looks really gorgeous when you're done. And there we go. And if you're using the mixed media mat, just literally just wipe that off with a paper towel or an alcohol wipe, or take it over to your sink and rinse it off, and that'll come right off. So I'm just going to move this to one side. And then you just need to wait for that to dry, and we'll pop it onto our card front. So we've got our card front there, and then our patterned background. I'm just going to, again, just use some foam tape just to raise it up. If you haven't noticed, I like to do this a lot. It just creates an extra dimension. I use foam tape a lot in my makes. The only thing is, it's very hard to peel off when you don't have particularly long nails. Okay, and then just line that up with your card. And then last but not least, I wanted to add a sentiment. So I just did a watercolour strip and then just added Happy Mother's Day. You could print this if you wanted to, or die cut it. I just wanted something really nice and small. Again, I'm just going to take some foam tape and I'm just going to rip it in half. I'm not sure if having a full strip or like a half a strip would look better, but this is what I'm going to go for now. And there we have your Mother's Day card. So we've got two there, very different, both using the same die set. And I just wanted to show you one more that actually doesn't use any of the stamps and just uses that 3D flower element. So I've just taken that 3D flower element, done 3 of them in really nice bright colours, added a sequin in the centre for my centre instead of doing the 3D section, but you could totally do the 3D element in the centre. And then I've just used that same sentiment die for the Happy Mother's Day section. So there you go, 3 very, very different cards, all using the same die set, all for the same occasion, but just shows you how versatile these stamp framelits sets can be and how many different things you can use them for and create. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys, and following along on how to make this gorgeous Mother's Day card with that lovely bike 3D flower wheels and then the gorgeous textured background. Or maybe you preferred the stamped background with those gorgeous watercolour flowers using the creamy matte acrylic paint. Or if you want to go super simple and just do the one that I showed you at the end with those 3D flowers as well. Like I said, there are so many options to use that one die set, and I wanted to showcase a few of those options and a few of those ideas that you could use just using that one die set. If you are interested in getting that die set or anything that I mentioned today, so like the creamy acrylic paints, the card stock, anything like that, then head on over to the Sizzix website and pop in my code Jess20, that's JESS20, and that'll give you some money off of everything that I've mentioned today if you want to get your hands on anything. Like I said at the beginning, if you do recreate any of these cards or even make anything for Mother's Day using any of the Sizzix products, I'd love to see it, so please leave me a comment and image down below, and make sure to use that hashtag MyMakingStory, because we love seeing all of your makes and sharing them across our socials. So have a wonderful day, have a wonderful Mother's Day in the future, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. But until then, stay safe and keep crafting. Thanks, bye.